Welcome back to another episode of WittyBantr. Your hosts, Nabil, Daniel, and Anika are here with our special guest, Selma Tufail. Selma, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
All the way from England.
Yep.
Thank you for waking up at what time of night is it?
It is 12 o'clock at night, so I had to have my nap.
Siesta.
So you don't sleep on a weekend late at night, or is every day your weekend?
Every day's a weekend.
So you take naps.
But I still sleep well at night.
Well, that is great to know.
So, Selma, for our listeners, maybe we can start with just a brief description of kind of what you're up to. My understanding is you are an artist and a teacher, but
what else are you that we do not know of?
yes.
Well, I am an educator and I am an artist. That is basically what I am. But I do less educating now and more arting.
If that is a word, I guess you are also a writer.
Maybe you educate people through your art. So maybe you educate people through your art. Maybe you're still an educator.
Oh, that would be nice. But I am a student. That I am. I'm a student of Spanish. So I'm more of a learner now.
And does is there a Spanish influence now on your art? Or I guess how would you describe your art style?
Well, I hadn't thought about it very deeply, but over the years, I think my art is more a narrative than anything else.
Okay, and is there? So you paint, is that correct?
And draws.
Yeah.
And draw. Okay.
Calligraphy. I have a few of her pieces.
Okay, a collector here.
Yes, a collector. I have 3 of your pieces actually, I think, in my room.
And
one of them is abstract, I would say. It's like a painting, and then you have like a little bit of realism with the pictures of the mosque, or those are like drawings.
Which one is the abstract one? Is it the one with the
it
windows?
It looks like a window. Yeah. Maybe it is.
Windows with shadows.
But it looks more abstract.
So, Selma, tell us about the evolution of your narrative, and we love guests who ramble on, even though this is all about witty banter. We don't mind if the volleying goes in one direction more than the other. So keep going.
Okay, you want a rambler? You got a rambler. No, one of my problems with art is that I tend to be a bit too realistic, not hyper realistic, because that would be cool. Mine is just a boring realism. And I've been trying to get away from that and be more abstract, because I don't see life. I want to show how I see life. And so I go into surrealism to get away from the realism, because life is not real the way that people perceive realism to be.
Right. I would argue.
Like us sitting here. This is, for someone of my generation, this is just very unrealistic.
Us communicating through the internet.
While broadcasting it.
Yeah, while broadcasting.
To thousands.
Thousands and millions of viewers.
But no,
potentially.
This is an exclusive group, so
yes, we take pride in low numbers. I think it's probably
that reminds me of a guy that Nasser and I met on the train in Italy, and he was showing off about these special wines that he makes. And somebody said, how much do you sell them for? And he goes, I can't sell them. They are priceless. Our conversation is so priceless that nobody can hear it but us.
That is true. So tell us more about your art and your relationship with surrealism and reality. And maybe I know Nabil took a deep breath, which means he's inspired to say something.
Well, I was
So
just gonna say, yeah, I think probably surreal art is probably more interesting because, I mean, if you're going for realistic art, it's already something humans are familiar with, and we already see that. But if someone's able to show us something different, then that's very useful. I also think that life is very complex, and we see life through our eyes and our ears, and it's a very human perception. But if you attempt to create abstract art, you can, you're taking a guess at uh, how maybe other beings, other ways of perceiving it. So I think that's an interesting angle to attack art with. Um, so when you create something artistic, do you have any methodology that you go through, or is it kind of more like freestyle?
and you might want to give us an example of a piece of art that is really you feel a strong affinity to either the pieces that are in Daniel's collection or in my collection, or something that you're already working with or currently working with.
Well, first of all, let me get back to what Nabil was saying. That is something I hadn't, something I read recently kind of put everything together, that there are two parts of our brain. One part experiences what we experience. The other part translates that experience into a narrative so that we can understand what we've experienced. And I have, from early childhood, found it very strange how one event can happen and all the people at that event have understood it differently.
Right.
And I thought it was a linguistic thing, because it is also a linguistic thing, because we can have this conversation and we can all leave with a different view of how we had our discussion. But visually, or any experience, it has to go through our filter of narrative, and then what we produce has gone through that narrative, and so that is what my art does for me. And I think that is what anything you produce, whether it's Anika's writing or your app that you're working on, whatever you're creating goes through something that will make it yours, and very uniquely yours, because nobody else can feel or process that information the way you do.
Oh, I was gonna say something.
Go ahead.
Do you think, like any creative thing, maybe not just art, but like, do you think there really is a truly original, or is most of what you create based off of something or influenced by something? Do you think you could ever create something that was like truly just original and no one had thought of, or just, I guess, for everyone, not just Salmigala?
Do I think I could have? Do you think I can create something that has no influence?
Yeah, or do you think there's been something like the first creator, or has everything been based off of something previous?
Well, the nuance that you bring to it, what Selma was saying earlier, it makes it unique. So even if it is an imitation, unless it's a photocopied imitation, but I would imagine even a photocopied imitation might have a degree of uniqueness to it, which I think, and I'm not a student of the fine and visual arts, but there is a study of mimeographed art, or that kind of, which is photocopied, but I feel that there is also a study of replicated art and its individuality as it is being replicated from a different time perspective or color perspective, or I don't know.
And I think the tools we use kind of limit us in a way where I mean you're like, if you use a pencil to draw something, that in itself is an influence, in that whatever you're going to be displaying is going to be through the medium of lead pencil or something. But there is a huge range of things you can do with that. So that alone is an influence. But I think the thing that makes art and creative endeavors interesting is when you put things together in some sort of creative way, and then people are like, whoa, when you take existing things and make something new, then people are kind of interested in that.
So is everything that's created unique? And we because there's a time lapse, every time Selma opens her mouth, it's already a minute past and somebody else has jumped.
Somebody's already said something.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that this takes us back to the concept of algorithms and how musical compositions have been made which musicians cannot identify as artificially created or made by human beings, because the various algorithms that function in our brain that help us create this new thing can now, for music, be replicated through a computer. The question is, can that happen with art too? Because as humans become more sophisticated, we're not becoming more sophisticated, as computers become more sophisticated, and we remain the Neanderthals.
Well, I mean, if they are the Neanderthals who created the computers, you can give them a bit of credit.
We're sophisticated to a degree, but we have our limitations that computers could surpass us with.
Yeah.
But yeah, you bring an interesting point. I think you could produce art algorithmically. If you just think of a circle, you could spell a circle, you could describe a circle in a function of some sort. So if a computer's job is to take functions and then produce something with it, then that complexity can be achieved. But yeah, that's I'm sure very difficult. But I think it's possible.
So tell us a bit more about your art, because you moved from you started as a student of art and were more had more realistic art, and then you had interpretations of mystic poetry. And what's the relationship between mysticism and art and poetry for you?
Well, to begin with, I just wanted to reflect something that was in me. That was when I was much younger. And so I created art which just showed what I felt, whether it was in the past or the present. And then gradually, it's hard to be objective about yourself, but with age, I started thinking of all the information that's inside me, not just my memories, not the conscious memories, but all the memories that are embedded that I don't remember. So there's a lot of stuff that I know that I don't know, but it's there. At least I like to believe it's there.
Yes.
I have a lot of information inside me.
You just don't know what it is.
I just need to access it.
It's archived.
Yes, it's all archived, yeah.
It is. But I don't have that Rosetta Stone to decipher everything in my DNA. So I thought of meditation, because I think at this point in time, other than hypnotism and the other processes people use, meditation is one way to access the deeper part of our brain, because we shut out all the noise. Mm-hmm. And once we've shut out all the noise from the media, from just general day-to-day living, grocery shopping, car fixing, we can get to deeper things. That's what I believed. And in that process, I started reading more mystical poetry. And I was going to say I started reading, but the thing is, from our childhood, our auntie used to sing to us poetry from the Sufis. And so it was always a part of our lives. But I didn't study it consciously. So when I'd go to Pakistan, I'd look for books of the poetry, of the mystics, of the Punjab. And from there, because I was studying Spanish, I started looking at works by Spanish mystics. And then third, I thought of the English mystics, because I was just Googling away, and I thought, because when you think of the English, I don't really think of mystics.
I think of hippies.
I don't even think that, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
He thinks of hippies. Why? Can we just hear why Daniel thinks of?
I don't know, because I've never heard of. Oh, well, you were talking about English.
Yes.
I didn't think you were talking about British.
Yeah.
Oh, you're thinking English speakers.
Yeah.
As hippies versus religious mysticism.
Okay, I've never heard of that actually, like that.
That concept. Okay.
Of English.
So you're thinking of the spiritual people who go to what is that thing called?
Ashrams.
The burning man.
Oh, Burning Man. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. What English mysticism is there, or is it like from what?
Probably like shamans.
Shamans.
Well, I only say that because I saw that Amazon program of, I think it's called Britannia or something. I think you saw it too.
As in pre-Christianity, yes.
Yeah, and like part of there was the first like, your medieval program, but it had like some mysticism in there. So that was a unique thing.
And there was always some substance that takes you to another state of mind. But your interest was not so much of pre-Christianity, was it? It was more of connection with an offshoot of or connection with religion, Selma, since you can't see.
Well, most mysticism that I know of is religion is the vehicle of that. But once I'd read poetry of mystics from different religions, and they pretty much had the same core substance, and I thought, well, this is not really religion, this is more human.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I went further abroad and saw that, it's a human experience. And I thought, oh, well, then it has to be something to do with the human mind. And then I read this book called The Third Man Factor. And that is when our body goes through extreme stress of either monotony or fear, if you're shipwrecked or stuck in some avalanche somewhere, or any kind of extreme experience. And it doesn't have to be violent. It can be just sitting in the North Pole where you're alone for long periods of time. And at some point, the brain generates this other presence. And that presence can either make you feel better, or sometimes it guides you to just jump into a sea of sharks because you think it's home and you just jump off the ship, but the brain is playing tricks on you. And I thought, so, but in many cases, and this has been recorded by people mountain climbers, and that it has actually guided them to safety through a part of the mountain that they had never been through before. But they felt that someone had actually told them, now take a left here and keep going, or whatever. They felt guided.
But do you think the mind needs to have that experience only in extreme situations, or not? Does it only?
Can you channel it for creative endeavors?
Yes.
Is that the same thing you're channeling when you're making a piece of art? Is it the same?
Or even I was thinking of Daniel and his cooking. When he's cooking something to perfection. Is that?
There's a lot of. I was thinking of coders that take DMT or LSD to help solve problems. Problem solve and stuff like that. So, because what I've heard in those states of desperation, when you're like either about to die or you're starving or you get to that extreme state, is that the chemical in your brain, DMT, is released, which has those symptoms of having a aura that's bigger than you, that's guiding you, and what is it? Almost like an
So
outer
you-
body experience.
So it has to be kind of hypnotic. So to lose control, because and then I'll channel it back to Selma again. The concept of control, particularly in your art, or your ability to lose control and still be creative, or use the lack of control to be creative.
So, you got
Are
me
you
in a
asking
spin.
if she's taking drugs while doing art?
Why not? Why not? What? Or does she aspire to? Because I know as in writing, sometimes I think, okay, I want to not be so self-conscious of myself as the creator as I write.
Well, I have a very basic theory for that. It's to do with driving. When you learn to drive, you're very cautious. You look at every stop sign. You look at every, and you're very careful. There comes a time when you get from point A to B and you don't remember how you got there, even though you were the one driving. I don't know if I'm the only one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, sometimes
You're
sometimes
autopilot.
I'll be driving and then like maybe 2 minutes will go by and then I'll be like, whoa, like
Yes.
Yes.
how did I not
That's
like crash?
exactly-
I don't know what just happened.
I'm not the only one.
Well,
but-
that's not good, but yes, go ahead. But yes, it's a common
No, but
fact.
I
Common.
think I don't think it's in our control. I think it's a natural thing. When you do things frequently enough, it becomes programmed.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of time, like when you leave the house and you think, did I switch this on or off? It's.
Or
you've
when
done
you
it.
pray 5 times a day, when those who do pray, if you pray, you go into autopilot as you pray.
True.
Yes,
Or fighters
yes,
as well.
And you don't remember praying.
Yes.
Fighters say they practice so much that like sometimes they don't even remember the actual fight they just had.
Yes.
So they couldn't
yes.
tell you how they won.
The-
It's because
so
they've
it's
practiced.
muscle memory, kind of. They talk
Yeah.
about that. Let your body take over
Right.
and not concentrate.
So one
So I think the thing that goes for. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
It goes for creative endeavors too, that you write and you write and you write, or you paint and you paint, and then I know that some days when I paint, hours go by and I think, oh, it's sunset already, and I've just been painting, and I haven't noticed the time. And that's another thing which is surreal, the sense of time. You can't really. Some minutes are very, very long and some minutes are very, very short.
Right.
So I think, to get back to what Anika is saying, it's nice to lose control, but you have to have many hours of controlled practice to make it part of your repertoire, and then you can lose control. I
Right.
think.
It's a controlled loss of control.
Yes.
Well, speaking of techniques to start or do a creative endeavor, we had a guest Gerardo on, and we were talking about finding inspiration when you have like what some would call a creative block or a lull in your kind of will and motivation to do the creative endeavor that you have. Do you run into lulls where you're just not feeling inspired, and do you have any techniques to kind of get yourself going in the right direction?
Oh, yes. For art, it's always museums or even art programs. They have a channel here called Sky Arts, and just watching other people create, looking at what people have created, going for long walks, it clears the brain. And because I get my inspiration from mystic poetry, I read poetry. Sometimes some verses really, resonate. And so that is, and earlier you were saying, what is the process? That is the process where I something inspires me to do something else, an image comes to my mind. So, for example, when Aisha, my sister, asked me to make her a painting, I know that she loves flowers, but she wanted something of a whirling dervish. So in my mind, because I was in California at the time, and I saw these kaya lilies, and the little bit in the middle, it reminded me of the hat of the dervish, and the white was like the gowns that they wear. And so that image kind of developed and developed, and now I'm working on a painting which has 8 to 10 kaya lilies, but they look like whirling dervish. So it's a bit of both.
Yeah, for me, I'll get blocks where I'm just like, I don't feel like programming, or I don't feel like working on my project. Let's see, what would the equivalent of a museum be? It would for someone who's programming.
Wouldn't it be an app that you think, wow,
An
how
app
did
store.
they?
Yeah, but I guess it would have to be you'd have to be able to see the code, which,
Yes.
there's a lot of open source code. But I guess I haven't really developed the
appreciation of somebody else's coding.
Yeah, I guess so. That's probably something I need to work on. But
You know what? You know what, Nabil? I go to lots of meetups because I love meeting up with people. There was a new meetup that somebody made where people who create apps get together to discuss the apps that they're creating.
like a
And I thought, well, that for me, this give and take with people who doing the similar sort of things to myself, that gives me a lot of motivation.
So, yeah, on that note, when I first started writing, I was a bit wary of meeting with people who were also writers, and part of it was I thought they know as little as I do. What am I going to learn from them? And I had to go often enough to realize everybody will provide me something unique, and maybe even not provide me something unique related to the craft, but will either through their personality or the way they talk about things or the way they tell me how things resonate, and you think, really, you connect with that? It just kind of opens up my mind to other ways of seeing things, and to remind myself to get out of my own comfort zone, and which I think can be deadly to your creativity, because if you're constantly surrounding yourself with what you're familiar with, it can give you a lot of comfort and pleasure, but it can reduce your ability to think differently. So I agree with you. Finding people who are interested in the kind of thing you're interested in, and observing them not as people who are mentors or people who will guide you, but observe them with a creative eye, and use that moment to think of your own craft.
Yeah, because I've listened to some musicians, at least in the hip hop world, and a lot of them, when you ask them, hey, like, what are the new artists you like? And a lot of times they'll just say, I don't listen to it, because sometimes subconsciously they'll get affected by it, and then the music they put out will start to maybe
imitate.
Yeah, exactly. So some artists I know, even beyond music, they like to live in isolation in that regard. Um, but yeah, I guess it's healthy to tap into your community of artists to see what's going on, but then you also have to just, you know, be careful not to imitate or anything like that.
Yeah, that is true. But I would imagine.
But that is how all these isms are formed. Like surrealism, that was at a time when psychiatry was big and people were studying the brain, and and because they were trying to depict dreams and things like that, the whole, okay, now this is going to sound very convoluted, but just
That's all right.
We're strapped in.
yeah, I know. How much time do I have?
And you are our guest, so we will respect that.
We're
Go
gonna
ahead.
dig. We're gonna dig for gold now.
I just need time. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh no,
I've
no.
lost
What,
that.
you
come
lost
back.
it?
Come back to it.
I was just thinking, I
Convoluted.
guess you guys were talking about pretty much two different ways of learning or honing your craft. Like, I don't think there's one way. Like Nabil was saying, there's probably people who learn better on their own or learn better from video or learn better from just practicing. I think everyone benefits from just practicing. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess maybe it depends on what you're actually doing. Maybe there's certain tasks that are better to learn from other people or learn like in the presence of other people versus like music that might be better if you're just by yourself or with a producer that has your style.
So yes, I mean what I think of when you mention that is communal learning and communal creativity versus individual, and the individual and the ego, and sometimes the relationship with gender and the expectation, gender and cultural gender expectations. I have found connecting with people that are somewhat familiar with, connecting with people was a cultural expectation and a gender culture expectation as well, and it helps strengthen my thoughts without judgment, whereas sometimes I feel when you're individual, it's about the self versus the connecting with others. So I know it's not binary.
You could just work with a balance.
Yes,
you could, and that's what I like. That I like to go and get inspired by people. I like to listen to them. I like to discover new things. But then I want to go into my own space and then process it and come up with what, my own. But like Nabil was saying, sometimes you just need your own space to just keep doing what you want to do. But I do like to create in a group where we're not, everybody's doing their own thing. I like to be around people, but not necessarily doing things with them all the time. Them doing their thing, me doing my thing, and in different spaces and not interfering with each other.
Right. Well, that relates to a lot of stand-up comedians. A lot of times they have to get material, they just have to like live life for a little bit, and that helps them develop, a stand-up bit. So they're going about life and then just analyzing it, and that helps them put it together. So yeah, you're right. You do need to, in some endeavors, you need to go experience life to have something to think about anyway.
What do you think would, like, I was just thinking of areas in coding that you would benefit with people, because I remember you were trying to get me and other people to be in your presence to code so that we could work on something.
I like that.
Yeah.
Be in your presence sounds so godly, doesn't
it? Being blessed by Nabil's presence.
So are you asking?
So like, do you think that coding is a one-man like learning sport, or do you think you would learn more effectively if you were surrounded by other people who had the same skill level as you?
The learning thing, I think it's personal. Depends on the human. In general, I would argue that the more people you have, the faster you can probably accomplish things. So if you're talking about developing an app, you're going to accomplish way more if you have a team that works together to build something. In regards to just learning. Yeah, because basically the background story on this is, I have general interest in wanting to develop a game. I'm learning about database stuff because that's going to not only help me make a game, but help me get a job in the industry faster than me learning how to use a graphics engine, which is the second part of the whole equation. Graphics engines are a much more you need a deep understanding, and if I tried to tackle that first, I don't think I'd gain the skills required for some entry level role. So that's why I talked to Daniel and other friends to say, hey, I'm learning about database stuff. How about you guys download one of these graphics engines and try and figure it out?
Or even just coding, though. You wanted Ajit to like work on something coding relate, like he would do the back end, you would do front end coding
Right.
stuff.
Well, at this point, I would want him to learn how to
Do the
work a
graphic
graphics
engines.
engine to develop some sort of uh, automated art. But yeah, group learning. Yeah, I guess it could be. Yeah.
Like I'm thinking for like digital marketing, when I'm doing like when I'm working in different platforms, like I definitely like to work on my own thing. I get more done that way. But like if I want to learn or if I'm starting to work on something else, sometimes it's easier to just ask someone like, okay,
What do you do?
what's going to be approved, disapproved if I upload on this platform, or what are some issues that I'll run into versus me trying to figure it out on my own, Googling and like opening multiple tabs trying to find out what the issue is.
You know what? One of our great strengths as human beings is to be able to function in groups. So if you are working on a creative project and you can inspire people to join you and do the other pieces and to help build whatever you're building, that is one of the things that successful humans do well. That's what the prophets did.
That's
so you've
You
got
can
to
be
come up with a
prophet-like.
set of stories.
yeah. No, that's how humans evolved, right? They're adaptive and work in groups. I think that's how we've survived up until this point.
So I think this is our 11th.
Yeah, this is
The
number
11th
11.
episode. What's been unique about all of our guests and ourselves, I think, as well, is that we straddle very unique cultures in very, very kind of different group, whether, Michael and, the background he brought or Gerardo and,
I found Gerardo's talk very, very interesting. And just to think he's a Mayan, and I was looking at him thinking,
Yes. So on that note, tell us more of because we do like to make sure that for each guest there's a connection in some way in creativity and themes that we find similar. What resonated for you with the conversation with Gerardo, if you can remember anything in particular, and your own traveling around the world and living in Dubai and living in Pakistan and California and now in Spain and also in England. What role does that play in your creativity, and where does it maybe create a hindrance? I don't know.
No, I don't think there's any hindrance. I love it. When Gerardo said that when he goes back home, or the other home, the second home, it's this is home too. The time seems to slow down and everything goes slowly.
We all connected with that.
We did. But the thing is that wherever you go, whether I lived in Madrid for a while, I lived in Dubai, I lived in Qatar, whichever culture you go in, there's a lot of similarity, and the differences are what give it flavor. It's like spices. The basic thing is always the same. That is what I have from having lived in different places. The basic needs of people are the same. To be accepted, to be respected, all of that. But then you've got these other flavors which people pride themselves on as our culture. And those are a little bit different. What do people pride themselves on? If you go, I like all the flavors. It's like having, I think it's enriched my life. And
anything in particular from any culture that you think, this is what is really directed and helped me focus in either my writing or my teaching or my artwork or any other space in your life?
I think it was the Punjabi Sufis. They have grounded me. What they say resonates. I can relate. I love the sound of the Punjabi poetry. I just love that language. So that really, and I'm not an expert. And I spent a full summer break looking for a Punjabi to Urdu to English dictionary, which a dear friend and relative in Chitwal found for me because I wanted to know more. So I'm not an expert, but based on what I know, that resonates the most. Sufi poetry from the Punjab.
And why is that distinguished from other
Might not be.
cultures?
Other mystic poetries? I think the Punjabi mystics that I love don't really like prescribed religion.
And can you name them? Name the ones that you like.
Inquisition.
No. I'm saying name them, as in, which
Yeah,
ones do you
Sultan
like?
Bahu. I love Sultan Bahu. I just Baba Farid. These people go for what I believe is the essence of religion, which is the essence of humanity. And all these other rituals which are not worthless because it's the rituals that have helped communities unite. So rituals are a very useful part of helping us as human communities be stronger and supportive and develop. But taken to an extreme, it just becomes ridiculous. And I think in the other mystics that I have read, or later mystics, they kind of cling too much to prescribed religion.
Oh, okay.
And that doesn't do it.
So you
for
want
me,
to disconnect. In relation to the storytelling and the narratives and so on, this morning we were discussing with Munim the video game that the Nabil and Daniel have been playing with Faisal and Ajit recently, and the concept of storytelling in that video game, which is interesting, and maybe you want to share that experience or that conversation.
Yeah, so the background on the video game, it's a game called Detroit Become Human, and it's a story about human society in the future, and we have basically robots that help do your cleaning and other sort of services. So you play three storylines that are in the same world, but you play their story individually, and it kind of each chapter is a different part of that person, that android's story. And it's an interesting game because it's not you don't have to be like there aren't a lot of micro mechanics that you have to manage. It's very much like a decision-based thing where you kind of the walking around is very straightforward, and you run into an encounter, and then you have like 4 options to choose from on how you want to react, how you want to respond to a person, and each decision you make will also change the outcome of the game. So your story can end up much differently than other players' stories. So that's the game, and I forgot what the conversation we were having about it.
In relation.
Yes, it's interesting because it's this, being humanity. We were just talking about mystic poetry and the essence of humanity, and now we're talking about video gaming. And one of my takeaways from our discussion this morning was that the appeal of video games, particularly this one or others as well, is the amount of time you can stay engaged with them. So that was interesting to me, particularly when we question the ability of millennials to concentrate for too long. Mm-hmm. And you think, oh, that's interesting, and you find something that takes longer to do, more appealing than watching an hour and a half movie. but also the concept of the wanting to participate in the storytelling and finding yourself. And I don't know, I'd love to see the game because I'm interested in hearing, but I don't know what Daniel's perspective.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you're almost like figuring out what your purpose is with each storyline, and they all kind of intertwine later in the story. But I guess what makes video games more interesting to us is that you get to be part of the story and tell the story rather than you're observing it.
Isn't that like the episode of Black Mirror, the recent one?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like it's almost like Blade Runner and also Black Mirror, kind of like the whole.
Did you see
dystopian future.
are you referring to the Black Mirror episode? It's like
Oh,
it was
the
a
movie.
short movie called Bandersnatch or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like that.
This is very much like that. So if you're not familiar,
No, I am not familiar.
Black Mirror is a series, a show that each episode's very different.
It's about dystopian future.
Yeah.
You've seen it.
That I have seen that.
But
I
you haven't
just don't
seen the
know
movie.
episode.
So the latest
It's a movie.
one is a movie, and in the movie you can decide, like, as the movie's playing out, you use your remote to pick how you want the story to continue, very similar to the game.
There used to be children's books that were written that way,
Right.
that
And
choose your
They reference
ending.
that as well in
It's
the
the
movie.
same concept. Although I think the game that we're
Yeah.
referring to is much better than
The
that.
only issue with
Yes.
I guess that movie we had was that they gave you choices, but you pretty much had to have done one certain thing.
Yeah,
like
it's like there's 4 choices, and 3 of them you're definitely gonna fail, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
Oh.
So that was the
You
only
have to
flaw.
make the right choice.
Yeah, like you'll make a decision, and then like the story will end, and then it'll bring you back, and then you have to choose another one.
right.
Whereas
So there's, like-
Detroit game it'll keep going. Like it won't. There's no.
There's like 40 different outcomes at the end, like of Detroit becoming human. Versus I feel like in Bandersnatch it was like 8.
Yeah, but it's
Or-
the same idea, and I also think it's kind of indicative of how human entertainment will be in the future, where it's right now entertainment is developed and created by a group of people, and it's fixed, and then they send it out to us and we consume it. But I think the future of entertainment will be very much tailored to an individual's desires. So you will be put into these experiences, and we'll be able to react, and it'll change the way the whole movie or game will play out.
I can imagine the population getting very nervous about that, because one of the things that humans have liked as groups is predictability, which is why you have all the laws and rules and regulations.
Right. I think.
But to give a human the freedom to sort of say, you create what entertains you, then you have as many different options as you have humans.
Or do you?
Well, I think actually I think you could still have the element of predictability in the actual environment. Yes, you are the one who is unpredictable, but I think the experience will be similar to that if you were walking around in some city. There are elements of predictability, so I think that will still be there. But and then there was a comment on, I don't know if you said it or Selma, but it was will there be a limit to the amount of options there are? I think the creativity will come from the AI, the machine that develops the experience. They're going to be the ones who make the content interesting.
So here's my question: how unpredictable are we as individuals? I mean, Selma, Nabil, Daniel, Anika, the 4 of us. Apart from having some fuse going off in our minds, how unpredictable are we as individuals, where we would make decisions and do things where you think, where the heck did that come from?
I can give you an example.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think like if you're talking relative to robots, I'm sure that we would probably be pretty predictable.
Yeah.
But relative to each other, I think we can be super unpredictable. Like in the game,
Yes.
there was a scenario where it was like either you go peaceful protest, like civil war, or you run. And so I went the civil war route, where
Yeah.
I was like, all right, everyone, like go in.
Attack.
So yeah. So Nabil and Ajit were expecting me to be like extremely violent throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
But whenever they gave me the option to spare someone's life in the middle of this war,
Yes.
I was like, no, I'll spare it.
Yeah, it's like it's like kill or spare, and we're
Yeah.
all like, oh yeah, he's gonna
Yeah,
kill him,
kill him.
and then Darren would just
spare his life.
What would be
So-
the outcome of sparing their life?
You know what's funny? I don't.
I
feel
doubt
like
it would change the
the
thing
outcome.
that much.
Yeah.
You're still disabling them, so
Oh.
you either permanently disable them or temporarily.
I'll tell you
disable
how, because there was another scenario where I did that and I ended up killing him, and they did a news report, and they added that aspect that I had killed someone. So they're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
even though these like AI robots are looking for
Equal
rights.
rights.
And peace, or equal
Yes,
rights
yes,
and
yes.
to be free, they're also violent. So we're looking at them as terrorism or terrorist
Because you
attack. So.
as human beings, there are times when you snap, and that to me is I have a scary fascination of the mind in that unpredictability of things. And generally when we've seen people behave aggressively, it's not unexpected. It's kind of, yeah, this person, they behave this way, and therefore they're behaving this way now. I don't know. Have you ever had experiences where someone who is generally not very peaceful or tends to be more aggressive behave the opposite? I mean, you do have people who lose it all of a sudden. You think, oh, what happened there? But do you have people going in reverse? And can you... Do you think basically my question is, are we as unpredictable as we think we are, unless we're having a nervous breakdown or something?
I think we're predictable. We're more predictable than we are unpredictable in large groups. Like if you're looking at a group of people, there's
But
an element
I
of
agree with you. But if we're in a large group and the mob mentality strikes,
Yes.
then we can do things which are very unpredictable.
It reminds me of the lottery. Remember the short story by Shirley
yeah.
Jackson?
That was a good short story.
Where the city, the town is doing a lottery, and you don't know what it's all about, and it ends up being that one person is going to be stoned,
Yeah.
and there's no rhyme or reason for this person to be killed.
It's for the crops.
But there's no logic behind it. It's just they've all decided that every year or every month or whenever as ritualistically they're going to kill someone. And it's only at the end that you realize, and these are families with kids, and so yes, in mob mentality,
But in a group,
Yes.
humans can be very unpredictable, I think.
they can be unpredictably mean. Can they be unpredictably kind?
Yeah, like they tip like $100. Like, whoa, I wasn't expecting
Well,
that.
so in groups, when I used the term group, I meant more like if you look at middle class humans in Redwood City, you can guess maybe what car they own or what they do for a living or what they like for entertainment. But yeah, in regards to actually physically being next to another person in a group, you can be predictable in the sense that there's that whole idea of when one person says something and it's wrong, other people start to agree with it, but nobody like questions it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Where and that builds, and then it becomes harder and harder when somebody knows the right answer, and it now becomes harder for them to like say no, this is wrong, because now your first year was maybe a 1 versus 1. Now it's like 1 versus the whole group, and you're scared to speak out. So I mean, I don't know how that plays into predictability. It's predictable in the sense that if someone says something, other people are likely to agree, even though it's wrong. Um, but and then I guess the unpredictable factor would be the guy who knows the truth, or I don't know.
Yes.
I've taken
Well,
this
so
conversation
again,
off the rails.
no. But it is kind of it's we join in when our community is being negative. We join in being negative. My question is, do we join in if somebody in our community is doing good? Is it
Yes,
just
I
as
think
easy to
people
slip into
do.
that?
That's how we've got charities. Somebody decides this group of people needs help, or dogs or cats, and then other people are
Yeah, that's
inspired
true.
to join them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the more we become a global society, the easier it'll be um, for the right thing to come out of humans. You know, before the internet, you were kind of stuck in your local community in a sense in regards to knowing what other people think. And so with that, you're sometimes, you're stuck with just ideas within a local geographic group. But with the internet now, you have so many different perspectives. I think it's easier for people to, uh, you know, make logical decisions, and
Yeah, I agree. Human rights,
yeah.
gay, lesbian, kind of gay, bisexual, that kind of, all of these groups or all of these ways that people have been racial discrimination, linguistic,
Well, I
all of
think
the.
it works in both ways. For a lot of people, it does level the playing field, but then those who are afraid of change, they hunker down and their
Hold on tight.
racist, misogynist views become more solidified, I think, in
They become strong
certain.
against the larger world that, we're going to be the last person standing, holding on to what we think is right.
Yes, because for centuries people have felt this is the right way to be, so how come we're being told it's not? There are people who have that sort of
That's true
mentality.
with Brexit and with all the wall and all of that. Oh, but we're not, yes, you're right.
You
Yeah.
told me no politics.
Yes. I know,
And just to know, if you want, you can talk about politics. I just state kind of
No,
that I'm not
no,
interested in it
We-
because everybody, that's all over the internet.
Yes,
So
yes. And the goal here is to focus on the creative aspect of humanity
and positive.
and be
We like to be
as
positive.
constructive and positive as possible. So we have 3 minutes left till the end of the podcast.
That is
so
true. So,
Wow.
is there anything on your
Yeah,
mind?
yeah. Let's talk about the future in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
We
Like
have 1 minute
quantum
to
physics.
say what
Thanks.
your future creativity, what are you going to do to enhance your creativity?
Yes.
that's our question to our guest for sure. So we start with our guest on about their plan.
Yeah, we're gonna flip this one on you.
Hence the witty banter.
Yeah, well, my plan for my art, for the future of my art, is to depict a narrative where things are united, not necessarily in a
Homogeneous.
happy union, because it isn't always a happy union, but everything is united. It's all part of it. And so I don't want to pick one versus the other, and I don't want to have black and white. I want things to my view of the world to be a unified with whatever it has.
The essential similarities of things. And do you have a website or a?
Any social media links that our viewers can find your work?
Yeah, I do have a WordPress, which I haven't updated recently, but I plan to. It has my writing, it has my art, it has my thoughts.
And what is is there a website address, or how does one see that online?
You can
I
send
think
us
it's
the
a-
link and we'll
Okay.
put it
I
on
can
the-
send you the link. I think it's just selmathufail@wordpress.com.
Your Instagram is interesting.
You have an
Ah,
Instagram.
I don't know
I
if you
have
want
an
to.
What is your
Instagram account.
handle
Yeah.
on Instagram?
if you want to plug
I
it.
think it's Selbertissimo.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I didn't know who it was at first, and so I was following. And I was like, I wonder who this is.
Why did you
Interesting
choose
photos.
it? How did that come about?
Well, we've got what, half a minute left.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
No,
running
it
out
was
of time.
just a game that my daughter and my son-in-law and I used to play. Sergey was the one who introduced me to it, and you've got to put your name down, and you play with your own mobile phones or your iPads, and so every time people would put a different name, just play on your name or just call yourself something else, and so it just stuck.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So that's it.
So next week we have Afshan calling in also from.
Yes, and you will be over there too, right?
I will be in England too,
Oh.
so we'll be waking up early in the morning, and I'm glad you've set it up already, so we'll be able to call in. From
Yes,
there.
well, with
Yeah.
Afshan, she won't need to take a nap because she doesn't sleep.
That's good. That's good for us.
What about the rest of the team? Any updates?
I'm still working on my programming. I would say I had a lull, but I'm gaining my steam back. So that's that. Any updates with you on creative endeavors or otherwise?
I'm cleaning and spring cleaning, as well as trying to be more minimalistic.
Yes,
So,
that's always good. Remove
Yeah.
objects and items from your life to increase focus.
Exactly. So just keep a clear mind. That's my update.
Nice.
And I am finishing the final draft of my book, and February the 25th, I think, is the day that my chapter will be read at the San Jose Art Museum.
Yes, so please come to San Jose and
What day is that again?
It's a Sunday.
Oh.
So we'll be hosting live from the San Jose Museum of Art.
I don't know if we'll be hosting live, because I don't know if my data plan will support that, but I can definitely record on my phone and
Yeah.
then post it later.
Sounds good.
So
Oh, that'll be interesting. Very interesting.
yeah, a first for Witty Banter.
Yes,
Not
yeah.
in the living room.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for tuning in, and catch you later. Toodaloo.